Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Gatolan. I'm one of the senior research analysts here at Chardan covering biotech. It is my pleasure to introduce Russ Trenary, the CEO, and Larry Kenyon, the CFO of Outlook, to our virtual ophthalmology summit, where the focus of today's discussion is on wet AMD and other retinal diseases. Russ, Larry, welcome.
Thanks for having us, Daniil.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, so to start things off, could you please spend a few minutes and provide a brief overview of Outlook Therapeutics and highlight some of the recent milestones?
Yeah, so at Outlook Therapeutics, the big idea that we have is to be the first company to ever earn regulatory approvals for bevacizumab in ophthalmology. Bevacizumab is a molecule that's been used in other specialties, like especially in oncology. It's a great anti-VEGF molecule for retina specifically. And so what we have determined over time is that if we can find the right regulatory strategies, run the right studies, and produce a product that meets the requirements for approval in ophthalmology, that will be a differentiated product compared to the off-label bevacizumab that has, in fact, been used in ophthalmology for quite some time. So we feel like we're really setting ourselves up with a differentiated product that will deliver additional value for bevacizumab that's never been seen in the marketplace before. This has been a big year for us. After receiving some guidance from the FDA in the second half of last year, where they were requesting one more additional pivotal trial from us, we came up with a study design and a statistical analysis plan and a question for FDA that resulted in a SPA approval in January of this year. So we were able to really go into this final clinical effort with FDA with a trial design and a stats plan that they had seen and approved. And as part of that SPA approval, they also indicated that this would indeed check the box for the additional clinical evidence that they were looking for as part of our approval process. Based on that SPA approval, we then quickly went out to the marketplace to raise money for this clinical trial and for the eventual launch, assuming we were successful in getting approval in the second half of next year. And we were, in fact, able to raise up to $172 million. That basically came with an initial tranche of $65 million, and then there are about another $100 million associated with warrant conversions that we hope to see in the not too distant future. In addition to that, we were able to begin enrollment of our NORSE clinical trial in Q1. In fact, it was really shortly after, within weeks of the SPA approval that we got from the FDA. We started initial enrollment, and in the two next earnings calls that we've had since we began that trial, we indicated that we felt comfortable that we would complete enrollment in the third quarter of this year, much to some people's astonishment, because that would indicate that this trial would have enrolled much quicker than the industry average. The other piece of good news that we got in the second quarter of this year was we received EMA approval. So our product got approved in the European Union in Q2, and that was followed by an additional approval in the UK in quarter three, just after the 4th of July in the second quarter. So those two approvals in Europe made us feel good, not only so that we could continue some discussions with potential partners in Europe while we continue to ready ourselves and do the foundational work there to prepare for a launch. But it also kind of validated the clinical trial data that we had produced for both FDA and EMA, and it also validated the CMC work that had been done. So we're quite pleased with those approvals. And then finally, probably the other key milestone that we've been able to take care of this year so far is we have completed a couple of Type C and Type D meetings with the FDA in quarter two and quarter three, which were really focused on going through the items in our CMC area that FDA had questions about. So it was a really wonderful opportunity to remind them what their questions were, to show them that we had done the kind of work that they wanted us to do, and then present the data to them to illustrate to them that we indeed have the answers that they're looking for. So we're very pleased to have those in our rearview mirror as well.
Got it. Thanks, Ross, for that overview. Very, very helpful, very, very thorough. Um, Obviously, lots of milestones and more things to come in this year and next. Before we dive into some of the items that you've discussed, I wanted to talk about the current market for bevacizumab or Avastin, right? It's been used for years off label. Can you talk briefly how it is positioned in the current treatment landscape?
Yeah, happy to. So off-label repackaged bevacizumab is arguably the standard of care. It's the most often injected anti-VEGF in the United States and in Europe. What we see with that, though, it's that it's used because it's cheap. The payers are able to get patients started on a good, cheap anti-VEGF that, although it doesn't meet the requirements for an ophthalmic approval, and although there have been reported difficulties associated with everything from supply to quality to lack of drug potency, it at least allows the doctor to engage with the patient on their very first visit and tell them, look, you've got wet AMD. We've got a treatment regimen that will start with this drug and probably switch to another one, but they can do a same-day treatment from the day of diagnosis because it's so cheap. So today, it's kind of mostly positioned from the majority of the doctors. In fact, about 2/3 of the doctors report that they will start a patient on off-label bevacizumab, but then 40-50% of the time or more, they'll end up switching them to a brand that is approved for ophthalmic use.
Got it. And I guess a couple more questions on that. So first, you alluded that your formulation is going to be specific for ophthalmic use. So if you can talk about key differences compared to the repackaged product, and two, assuming you get the approval, what is the process of enforcing that compounding pharmacies stop supplying specialists with the repackaged drug? And how long does that process take?
Yeah, so the differences between bevacizumab that was designed to treat oncology and it was designed to be delivered through a drip IV as opposed to injected directly in the eye. Those differences between that product that then goes through a repackaging process and the product that we're aiming to get approval in the United States and where we've already gotten approval in Europe is pretty significant. If you look at osmolarity specifications for ophthalmology versus an oncologic version that goes through a drip IV, they're just different standards. The ophthalmology has very specific standards they want to see in terms of osmolarity specifications. They've also got specifications around the pH level that the eye likes to have, not a requirement for oncology. There's a specification around utter lack of particulates in ophthalmology that doesn't exist in oncology. And in fact, if you look at the number of particulates that you're allowed to have in an oncologic version of bevacizumab that goes through a drip IV, if you look at particle sizes that are greater than 10 microns in size, you're allowed to have 6,000 particles per milliliter for the oncologic version of bevacizumab. We're only allowed to have 50, not 6,000. And with our preparation and the manufacturing process that we go through, we're actually closer to 0 than we are to 50. So that and the lack of endotoxins that we're allowed to have in our preparation versus the oncologic version there's just difference after difference after difference that are super important. So we're going to have a real, not imagined level of product differentiation when we go to the doctor and the payer and explain to them the difference between an on-label preparation and an off-label preparation. Now, as it pertains to what's going to happen to the off-label product once we're approved, there has been law and guidance in the past that's indicated that once a drug or biologic is FDA approved, then repackaging of or compounding of essentially the same thing is no longer authorized. And the enforcement on that can range from difficult conversations with the FDA to the state pharmacy boards to plaintiffs' attorneys who are irritated by the fact that there continue to be complications and adverse events associated with off-label that are at a greater level typically than the expectations that'll be at a greater level than with the FDA approved or EMA approved branded drugs. So how that enforcement takes place is not something we get to vote on. What we're trying to do is to ensure that we come up with the highest quality product that delivers the potential for a pristine level of safety and efficacy and gets delivered to the marketplace at a price point that is inherently reasonable. And pertaining to price, we've talked to the doctors and we've talked to the payers on what it is that they want to see. And I think we're going to be in a position to be able to deliver a product in the anti-VEGF space for retina that for the first time is equivalent to what the customer wants, as opposed to just some product or some price that we dreamed up.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. And bevacizumab is also used off-label for other retinal indications such as diabetic macular edema, retinal vein occlusion. So if lecanemab is approved for wet AMD, will patients with DME and RVO be able to continue to use your packaged product, or would they have to switch to lecanemab?
Yeah, so from a payer standpoint, if there's an approval for back of the eye treatment, then the payers don't differentiate. The payers have told us they don't really differentiate whether it's used in wet AMD, DME, or BRVO or whatever. We are regulated. We are prohibited from promoting a product for an unapproved indication, and we will only promote our product for wet AMD. But as you said, Daniil, the use of off-label bevacizumab in DME and BRVO does occur, but it's not something that we're going to be able to promote. We will focus all of our time and attention on the promotion of wet AMD.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about data that you submitted both to the FDA and to MAA, the data that were the basis for your approval in Europe and the UK. Can you talk about some of the key efficacy and safety data points that served as the basis for the approval?
Yeah, I think the thing that the EMA and frankly the FDA, who also looked at our NORSE 2, our pivotal trial endpoints and said, you met all your endpoints. I mean, we met all of our primary and so many key secondary endpoints. And one of the things that we demonstrated in NORSE 2 is our primary efficacy endpoint was the percentage of patients who gained 3 lines of vision. That's 15 letters. And we had almost 42% of our patients gain 3 lines of vision against 24% from the control group. And the p-value on that was 0.005. So this was not a statistical anomaly. I mean, this had a tremendous p-value associated with that result. One of the key secondary endpoints was the number of letters gained. What was the best corrected visual acuity gained at the end of 11 months, which was our efficacy endpoint. And at 11 months, our patients gained 11.2 letters of best corrected visual acuity. Tremendous result. And between 85 and 89% of our patients gained or maintained vision at every single checkup that they had during that 11-month period of time. We also had fantastic results of 1-line gainers and 2-line gainers. We had over 56% of our patients gain 10 letters or 2 lines. That was a key secondary endpoint, and we had almost 70% of our patients gain 5 letters or a line. The other thing that came out of that study was we had 0 permanent vision loss from intraocular inflammation. That was a key thing for the doctors because they've seen a lot of intraocular inflammation from products that were either in clinical trial or even have been launched. And these IOIs, these intraocular inflammation events, can cause permanent vision loss. We had 0 cases of that. So both from an efficacy and a safety standpoint, our NORSE 2 data were excellent. And obviously, our NORSE 2 data, in conjunction with what was known in the peer-reviewed literature about the use of bevacizumab for wet AMD, were enough to grant us an approval in EMA. And obviously, NORSE 2 is going to be one of our 2 key pivotal trials that the FDA's already opined on as having been positive. That'll all be part of our resubmission that will occur early next year.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about the CRL that you guys received last year. Obviously came as a surprise to some. And what do you think happened? Where was the disconnect? And where does there continue to be a disconnect between the FDA, who requested a new trial and requested you to address certain CMC issues, versus Europe, who were fine with the current data package for their approval?
Yeah, I think the great thing that we're adding to the data package with our resubmission will be the results from NORSE 8, and that is the additional non-inferiority trial that we're running. That includes 400 patients. They're all treatment naive, so they've never been treated before. And they'll be randomized either to the treatment arm, which will be our ONS 5010, which is our bevacizumab candidate, or the control arm, which is Lucentis, which is an approved product in the United States. The nice thing about this trial for the doctors and the patients is that if they're in the control arm, they're going to be utilizing an FDA-approved product. If they're in the treatment arm, they're going to be utilizing a product that's been approved in Europe and the UK. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for this trial because everybody thinks it doesn't matter which arm they end up in. And our goal is to look at those data from those 2 arms at the end of 8 weeks and show a non-inferiority margin of less than 3.5 letters. Now, one of the things we like about this trial design is, first of all, it's a short one. We've been enrolling it quickly, we think. And the entirety of NORSE 8, the treatment regimen of an injection at day 0, day 30, and day 60, and then the patient exits at day 90, that treatment regimen of injections at day 0, day 30, day 60 is exactly the treatment regimen that we had at the beginning of the NORSE 2 trial. So we can go back and look at the data from NORSE 2 and look at what that 8-week efficacy endpoint looked like between ONS 5010 compared to Lucentis, and see that there was a non-inferiority margin of way less than 3.5 letters that was demonstrated in that trial. So we expect to see the same thing in NORSE 8. So we think that clinical trial design that is SPA approved, the statistical analysis plan that is SPA approved, and the FDA's indication that successful data from that trial will satisfy their additional require for additional clinical evidence. We feel like we've got an upfront indication from FDA. This is exactly what they're looking for, to put additional clinical evidence with the successful NORSE 2 trial that they've already indicated met all of its endpoints. As far as the CMC issues go, it was a list of CMC items that we thought were easy to handle, easy to answer, but just to make sure, we scheduled, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, a series of type C and type D meetings to go through those questions and show
Mhm.
FDA that we had done what they'd asked and show them the data and see if there was anything else that they wanted. So we feel those were successful meetings, and probably one of the biggest things that takeaways that people should have is our CMC package is approved in Europe. Our CMC package is approved in the UK. So we expect by giving the FDA the additional information that they asked for in the CRL, that it will include everything that they're looking for.
Okay, got it. So that's a very thorough approach, and I'm sure many would appreciate that. Nonetheless, the FDA is without risks. Every time you submit something, there is no guarantee. What do you see as currently as the biggest risk to the U.S. approval?
So I think, Danil, the reason we're confident about this is we believe we've mitigated all of the items that were contained in the CRL. We've talked to the FDA about what those mitigation strategies were. We've received approval in Europe. We've received approval in the UK. And
Hmm.
I think one of the things that we did was we took the FDA up on some good advice that they gave us in our first Type A meeting that we had with them, where they explained to us why did we not get approval. And of course, the items were contained in the CRL. But one of the pieces of advice they gave us at that Type A meeting was the head of the division that reviews that's going to review our resubmission said, don't be a stranger. Don't just go away, make a resubmission without talking to us. Come back and meet with us. Tell us how you're doing. See if there's anything that any other questions that we have. And so that's why we scheduled the Type C and Type D meetings. It wasn't at their insistence, but it was
Hmm.
an offer on their part. It's that offer is open to any company, but we took them up on it, and I think that's given us an opportunity to continue to develop a good relationship with the agency and let them know we're taking seriously what you told us. We're not leaving anything to chance in CRL. We're addressing every single item and talking to you about it before we go ahead with the resubmission.
Got it. Makes sense. And the question about IP, given that bevacizumab is off patent, how do you see competitive landscape developing over the coming years?
Yeah, so the nice thing about the approval that we got in the EU is, when you go through we did an 8.3 mixed application with them with a novel biologic, bevacizumab, and it does grant us 10 years of market exclusivity, having earned that approval in the EU. Likewise, if we're successful getting FDA approval, that gives us 12 years of regulatory exclusivity. So I think all the regulatory bodies wanted to ensure that if these types of novel approaches were taken in the biologics area, that work would be rewarded with an exclusive period of time. It's kind of similar, I think, to what they did with some of the orphan drugs, who I think they get 4 or 5 years or so of exclusivity. But in this biologics area, it's 10 years in the EU and 12 years in the US.
Got it. Okay. And assuming your trial reads out successful and you do get an approval, can you walk us through how you're seeing the economics in the U.S. market, and what are your expectations for potential launch?
Yeah, so I think one of the really important pieces of work the company did years and years ago, and has continued to follow up on, was to do deep level surveys with the retina community and payers to determine whether there was an appetite for this product. I mean, years ago, it was an open question. you've had access to off-label bevacizumab for a long time. Do you care whether there's a regulatory approved version or not? And what we found was about 82 to 85% of the doctors in Europe and the United States all indicated, yeah, this is valuable to me. I'm interested or highly interested in a regulatory approved version of bevacizumab. So that's what encouraged the company to make the commitment to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on manufacturing development and clinical development, and the regulatory work that was required to get this product ultimately to the market. But we know the doctors want it. The other thing that we've been able to determine is we know that the payers are more than open to this as well, because we've been able to show them what they're actually paying for off-label. They start with a product that's less than $100 per injection, but they end up, because of the high switch rate, with an average cost per injection that's closer to $1,000 per injection than it is $100 per injection. So we've been able to socialize that information with the payers to say, before we even factor in the cost of these safety issues associated with occasional outbursts of endophthalmitis, which can cause blindness, et cetera, just lack of efficacy has a cost to it. And you don't see doctors switching 40, 50, 60% of the time from their brands, but they are switching that often from off-label, and that costs the system money. So I think we're feeling like the marketplace is ready for us. Obviously, the category is getting more expensive by the day. You had price leadership from several companies out there who had the pricing that they had for the branded products that they had. But their new products that they've come up with have wholesale acquisition costs that are hundreds of dollars higher than what their other brands were. So the cost per injection in this category it does not appear to be going down. It appears to be going up. So we think the marketplace has always depended upon a reasonably priced bevacizumab. We want to take that position, but be able to deliver something that has same expectation of safety and efficacy as a regulatory approved brand.
Okay, got it. And did you say that feedback is consistent between the US and Europe?
They are. It's amazingly close. It was 82% of the doctors in Europe were interested or highly interested, and 85% of the doctors in the United States were. And that was actually even before we were able to socialize with them the real differences between an ophthalmic bevacizumab versus an oncologic bevacizumab. So I think we love having that conversation, and the doctors love hearing it, because it really helps them understand, why is all this switching going? Why is my patient not doing as well on off-label as it does with the brands? And I think we're able to walk them through the ophthalmic requirements and what happens to the molecule during the repackaging process. And it helps them understand why those patients don't do as well as they wish they would.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. So I know you're gearing up, for a commercial launch in Europe sometime in the first half of next year. Can you talk about the work that your company is doing now to prepare for a successful launch? Who you're talking to, who you're hiring for, potential partnerships that you're considering for, to ensure the successful commercial launch there?
Yeah. So there's very important market access work that needs to be done before launching a biologic of this type. And what that entails is ensuring you've got a team of folks who are talking to payers and going through the health technology assessment process on a country-by-country basis, and using some medical scientific liaisons to be able to explain to both the payer and retina and the retina community what the attributes of our product are. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you just launch into those categories. So we're doing that foundational health technology assessment work that establishes pricing, to be clear about it, on a country-by-country basis. In conjunction with that, we've always said that we would entertain discussions with potential partners who might want to either take a distribution or licensing deal to utilize their own organizations, their own European footprints, their own infrastructure to launch this product. And so we're evaluating those and just kind of doing the net present values on what do we think delivers the most amount of value, going it alone in those markets or utilizing a partner. So we'll continue in those discussions, and we'll continue doing that market access work that needs to be done, whether we end up in a partnership or whether we end up launching it ourselves.
Okay, got it. And can you talk about your strategy for the US launch as well? Maybe talk about the value that you expect to get out of your partnership with Cencora.
Yeah, Cencora is a Fortune 10 company, as you know. A lot of people might know them as AmerisourceBergen. They've gone through a name change recently, and everybody knows Cencora as a best-in-class 3PL provider. They can do your shipping, your logistics, your storage, and they are the kings of cold chain distribution. And we do have a temperature-controlled product, so we need that product controlled all the way from the factory to the customer. Cencora is great at that. What people don't realize is Cencora has built up all the same capabilities that Big Pharma has in terms of pharmacovigilance, patient hub services, regulatory expertise, payer connectivity, GPO contracting. They within Cencora house all of those functions. And I think we're the first company, they tell us that we're the first company that's come along and looked at that whole Chinese menu of capabilities that Cencora had, said, we'll take it all. We'd like you to perform all of those front and back office capabilities. And so we're working with Cencora in both Europe and the United States so that we don't have to hire and train people for all of those functions. They're already at Cencora. They already know how to perform all that functionality. So we're utilizing their people on a kind of a pay-as-you-go basis. And then, of course, some of it is just baked into the distribution fee that we've negotiated with them. So it's a great relationship. I've never seen a business-to-business partnership work this well, and we're very excited to have them with us in both the United States and in Europe.
Okay, got it. Excellent. Just a couple more questions to finish off the session. You mentioned early on about having completed a raise and to fund your North 8 study. Can you talk a little bit about the cash runway and the assumptions that go into the cash runway? And yeah.
I am so fortunate to have my chief financial officer with me. And so he knows these numbers to the decimal point much better than I do. Larry?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Got you.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's a Zoom world, right? So the cash we raised earlier this year, Danielle, is designed to get us through the end of 2024. We continue to believe that's the case. Wanted to make sure that we had the funding we needed to support the launch in the U.S. And we fully expect to be able to have access to that capital relatively soon here. The current runway is currently focused on finishing North 8 and getting all of that wrapped up and getting the resubmission of the BLA, which are the top priorities. It's also, the cash has also allowed us to do a little bit of the work that Russ referenced for prepping EU for launching in first half. All of that work dovetails with the work that we're doing with potential licensing partners as well, all information that they would need to make a decision and for us to make a decision. So we feel comfortable where we're at. I think there's a lot of options out there that are non-dilutive to further enhance the cash position of the company, not the least of which would be a potential licensing partner. But there are other ways to monetize the revenue stream from Europe. Obviously, the plan all along has been to go it alone here in the U.S. because we believe that nobody knows the U.S. market like we do for this particular drug.
Got it. Understand. And one last question to kind of bring it all together, a big picture question. What do you guys think investors may still be missing about the outlook story that you would want to share?
You know, one of the things I think that in a way gets overlooked, they hear us talk about the standard of care and what does that mean? Well, it usually means, you know, what is the number one most often utilized strategy and injection. And we estimate that there are 3 to 3.5 million injections per year in the United States of off-label bevacizumab. And we're going to be talking to practices and payers about how we have something that meets all the ophthalmic specifications, which are not being met now by off-label repackaged bevacizumab, and how our pricing strategy that we built in conjunction with payers and doctors should provide a savings to the healthcare system while keeping the doctor's business of retina intact. There are a similar number of injections in Europe. Every time we look at these data, it's also running in the 3 million injections arena. So we and/or our partners in Europe, should we end up moving in that direction, have 6 million units or more of off-label bevacizumab being injected today of a product that could never get approval in ophthalmology. So I think when people really think about the volume of injections that are available to us as a target and our level of product differentiation, which we believe allows the possibility for a pristine level of safety and efficacy, as was demonstrated in our clinical trials so far, we believe that combination is going to be good for payers, good for doctors, and good for our shareholders.
Got it. Okay. I think that brings us to the end of the session. Russ, Larry, thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us, Daniil.
Thanks.